Hello and welcome to Indus Special. I'm Meshal Malik. After Pulwama, social media witnessed an influx of anti-Pakistani and anti-Kashmiri sentiments. This manifested itself in a surge of war-mongering tweets and posts aimed at inciting violence against Pakistan and the Muslims in India, and also resulted in an escalation of tensions between the two nuclear states. In all this, social media served as a platform for not only voicing aggressive opinions, but also was used as a tool for propaganda and fake news. On tonight's show, we discuss exactly how social media has been used in India following the attack in Pulwama, and what other factors are at play in order to construct masculine Hindu narrative. Joining us for this discussion is Mr. Samir Yasir, a journalist joining us from Srinagar. Also joining us is Dr. Ihab Awais, who's a social media expert. And in the studios, we have with us Dr. Farasat Rasool, who's a professor of communication. Thank you all for joining us. Mr. Samir Yasir, let me begin with you. In reference to Pulwama, Trushar Barrett, who heads Facebook India's efforts to counter fake news, stated, "I've never seen anything like this before. The scale of fake content circulating on one story." Give a sense of how fake news was circulating on social media following the attack.
Well, this has been happening for a long time in India. Whenever these kinds of attacks happen, for example, when the Pathankot attack happened in Punjab, there was a lot of rumors, and this happens after every big attack in India. I mean, this was one of the biggest in recent memory in Kashmir Valley since the insurgency has erupted in the valley in 1980. And this was one of the biggest attacks. And so there was going to be some kind of repercussions. For example, there are thousands and thousands of Kashmiri students who live outside Kashmir Valley, for good education, go to the universities, live a normal life, try to live a normal life, but they have never felt that kind of, uncomfortableness as they did just recently. There was a sense that, for example, that somebody is going to come to our door and kill us or something like that, and that's exactly what happened. There were mobs in the Indian city of Dehradun. There were mobs in Bangalore. There were mobs, for example, in Delhi, trying to tell Kashmiris to move out of the houses, But if you look 10 years back, just 10 years back, this was not the case, that this was not what used to happen, for example, in most of the India. I think the explosion of social media, the internet being so cheaply available to the majority of the Indians, has played a very important role, in mobilizing crowds against Kashmiris.
And Mr. Samir, here I want to build on to your point. You said that this is not new. It has happened before in India. But let's keep in mind the social context at the time while the elections are going to be in April or May, and how that perhaps also was used as an impetus for more and more fake news to be witnessed. What was exactly new? What was exactly novel about the fake news emerging after this attack?
Well, this time, actually, there's a huge army, of Indians who actually throng social media, particularly Twitter and Facebook, and try to create this sense of narrative that Kashmiris are all terrorists, they should be dealt with that, and all these things, which happens throughout India. But this has actually being like right on it, just from the day the attack actually happened, that these are traitors, they should be dealt with that way. These are the Kashmiris who live in Indian cities are not actually they're not peaceful citizens. They're actually trying to foment trouble here. But the thing is that if one person actually did that kind of attack, in Pulwama, you cannot blame the entire population, for being like terrorists.
Okay, so Mr. Samir, here you mentioned how there are Indian armies on social media that you witness coming and doing all of this warmongering. With that, I'm going to take my next question to Dr. Ihab Awais. Can you tell us about how these armies, these trolls, in layman terms, operate when such an attack happens?
Yeah, I can agree with my friend Samir. Nowadays, the increase of social media had led to increase of media flow, brings news and information to individual. So nowadays, social media became turned to field of international interaction, which has made political usage what we can call it the soft war. this is the war with of idea and psycho process. So if we need to influence this one about the Kashmiri's case, we can say that there is a special task in the army who can working in the creating the idea and the propaganda and trying to spread it in through the society. So anyone who are so far of the reality, he will take this idea and start spreading this idea without any approve about this information and the source of this information.
Yeah. Okay, so I take your point there, and with that I want to ask Dr. Farasat Rasool here, when we're talking about communication, and as we've seen both of our guests mention how there was a systematic dissemination of propaganda, how exactly has social media provided a platform for there to be more systematic propaganda?
Well, propaganda, when we talk about propaganda, it's been there for quite a few decades now. The first formal propaganda was used by the Nazis when they appointed a propaganda minister for that, Goebbels. We're quite familiar with that. Now, in this age, what has social media done? It has provided a new platform for all that information, for all that chatter to be digitized in a particular manner. So now what happens on social media is that the visual editing is there, the audio editing is there. You can make your message in a certain particular way, which could be perceived in a particular way that you have perceived for your audience. So that's how it provides actually a new platform. But coming back to the points that my esteemed guests have already talked about, I don't think the actual problem lies with the social media. Actually, the problem lies with the mainstream media. When they pick that particular information which is out there on the social media and use it as their own source of information. If the journalists play their role very responsibly and do not quote social media sources as their own sources and work on their own sources, I think this problem will fade away, because nobody takes social media, because if talking about the general public and taking social media seriously, I think there's a big question mark on that.
Okay, so since you mentioned here how media houses perhaps pick up this information from social media and then actively use it, that's where the problem is. I'll ask Mr. Samir Yasir here, from a journalist's point of view, do you think after these attacks, the editorial policy of mainstream media houses shifts in any way to allow for there to be a platform given to fake news?
The panelist before me who was speaking, I mean, he made a very important point. He was saying that, how social media actually gets used by the, for example, the big media houses in dissemination of information. That is precisely right. It's not just a subcontinental, issue, but it actually is being followed throughout the world. When you have people, who are like on Twitter, Facebook, they try to put out the information first. The first thing actually the media houses, the journalists, the responsibility of the journalist is actually to check the facts, whether it's actually true. So, for example, after the Pulwama attack, there were a lot of there were thousands and thousands of tweets, which were actually put out with a lot of information which is not true. Your job as a journalist is actually to sift through that information and find out what actually is right. But one thing which is very important is that during these kinds of times, you always have situation in which you have to actually make choices and choose what you want to report. For example, unfortunately in India, majority of the TV channels actually have been, going through this period, where they actually want to, for their own TRPs, they actually are trying to push a certain narrative that there has to be a war between India and Pakistan, that Pakistan has to be punished and all these things, which is like kind of spreading war mongering.
So, Mr. Samir here, isn't that a chicken and egg debate that the houses are doing that in order to put forth a narrative? But doesn't that mean that that narrative already exists and that's why they're putting it forth?
It does exist to a very large extent. I'm not denying that. There's a feeling that that there should be a war between India and Pakistan. I was just speaking to 40 minutes back to a person who lives in Jammu area and had to leave his house because of the shelling. He was saying that for once or for all, there should be a war so that we can live in peace. But at the end of the day, I think the media should play the role of peace. Like if it cannot push the countries to go for the war. It should actually push some kind of peace and reconciliation between the countries instead of actually trying to, instead of trying to build the bridges. Yeah. It should not actually, create a situation in which the countries are, fighting each other on the borders. Yeah. I mean, there's a situation where I have seen examples recently on social media. We have a worst example in India, where a particular television channel actually is often blamed for, raising passions, trying to actually, put out information and talking about a particular community, trying to a particular party's line.
In this case, we could see that the Indian media was actively trying to escalate the tensions, while even on the Foreign Office front and in the Pakistani media, there was active effort in trying to de-escalate the tensions, recognizing the fact that these are both nuclear states, trying not to create an active, tense environment in order to prevent any sentiments from fostering. And in this case, it is important to remember that the context for why India was actively doing this was perhaps to feed on the nationalist sentiments before the elections. And with that, Dr. Ihab Awais, when we're talking about social media here, and we see that India is the largest market for WhatsApp, for many other social media platforms, what specific dangers does that pose for social media platforms to try to monitor what's happening in terms of the content?
Yeah, I agree with you. About from this in the number language, that we have almost 460 million users in the internet, almost 360 using social media. But for me, the social media cannot be considered as the basis of changing the society or basic of the platform for that. But we can see that the social media create the requirement for this situation and promoting for intellectual moving by creating the awareness and the political trends for the individual. The dangers come from here because anyone with laptop or with internet connection, he can publish what he wants, and any idea he come on his mind, he can add just a sound or image, so he can spread it in the all around the world. Now social media give the opportunity to anyone to publish any case about information or news without any any reason for this one.
And Mr. Ihab, recognizing that social media provides a platform to larger base here, and they also have seen in 2018 specifically that they were attacked with several scandals, social media, and they had to take control of the situation. What steps have they taken actively in order to try to curb fake news from spreading all over social media platforms? Twitter, WhatsApp, Facebook?
I think if we need to prevent the individual from the social media, we have to invest in the social networking to develop the value of citizenship and the responsibility among the individual to prevent them from the propaganda and bad effects of the social media. We have to increase the awareness among the individual and the internal society about the bad effects of the social media and networkings. In the same way, we have to enhance the role of positive social networking in the community to spread the internal awareness among the society. So all of that we can prevent the society from the bad side of the or outcoming negative source of information.
Okay, so Dr. Ihab, hold on to that thought while I move to Dr. Farasat Rasool. So we talked about propaganda earlier, trying to set the premise for the debate. But is there such a thing as positive propaganda to work in someone's favor, or is it always negative?
Actually, there are many types of propaganda out there. We have white propaganda, we have black propaganda, and then we have gray propaganda. These are the three major types of propaganda. Coming to the white propaganda, yes, when state uses the propaganda for its own favor to harness the public opinion in a particular way, that is termed as usually the white propaganda. The biggest example of white propaganda would be the patriotism. Philosophically speaking. Yeah. The entire idea of patriotism is basically a white propaganda which is propagated by the state itself for its own people, so that a positive image or positive outcome to be milked out of it. So that's how it's positively used. Coming back to the point earlier that was discussed by my fellow panelists, the thing is that social media actually it provides just another platform for all that chatter which is already going on in the public. I mean, for example, the chatter which is going on at coffee shops, at tea houses, at street corners, in all those areas. What social media does, it actually provides a digital platform so that that chatter is all recorded, that chatter is all edited in a particular way, and then it is spread out.
But here we have to keep in mind the difference is not just the fact that it's digitalized, it's also that it's put on a public platform for everyone to see. So isn't that in a way different from when we're just having a conversation between two private individuals and then putting it up on Twitter where the whole world can see? Doesn't it sway opinions in a different manner?
Actually, it does, but then it depends upon the source. If the opinion leaders, persons who have people who have a particular influence over or particular sway over the public opinion, when they do it, for example, if a politician or if a journalist, when that person tweets a certain information from his or her personal account, it carries weight.
Because it lends credibility.
Exactly, it lends credibility to it. But other than that, I don't think it carries much weight. Yes, it does make a certain influence, certain environment, and then all things add up to that particular environment. Messages are created in that particular fashion. But I guess it's the responsibility of those people who have a certain credibility in the public to monitor their information.
They have. And since we were talking about white propaganda here, something that is not as insidious as the other forms of propaganda, I'd like to ask Mr. Samir Yasir here. So there was a video, a fake video of Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaking to a grieving woman, talking to her, and it was found out that that video was in fact 6 years old. Now, inherently, this content is not inciting any form of violence. So what is the purpose of when certain fake news is geared towards providing a positive image for these politicians?
There are one or two things which I want to tell you here is that in such a huge population, for example, in a population like India, 1.2 billion people, when you have cheap internet, what is going to happen is going to have a mass explosion of people on the internet. But, that is what has happened in the recent months. The second thing is that there is going to be less use of social media for the positive results, as Dr. Farasat was saying. For example, you talked about the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's video. I have not seen it, but when you draw the most recent examples of it, for example, you had seen violence in Myanmar, and there were politicians who were openly on Twitter and Facebook instigating violence. There are people in Bangladesh these days who are actually speaking against Rohingyas. There is a governor in India who actually says on Twitter that you have to boycott Kashmiri Muslims because they preach terrorism, that kind of a thing. There have been people in the higher offices in India who have been saying same things about Kashmiris. But the thing is that I can understand people, influencers, people who as Dr. Farasat was saying, that those people who actually have certain kind of influence on the society. You can stop them by bringing some stories against them and talking about starting a debate. But what do you do with a huge population out there who is day in and out trying to troll you and tell you things which are nonsensical, which are things which don't even exist at all? Like, for example, there was this recent tweet which was tweeted, I think, more than 1,500 times, which actually said that, Kashmiri Muslims have come from Central Asia and they dragged Kashmiri Pandits hundreds of years ago out of this place. And, whatever happened, unfortunately, there was this exodus of Kashmiri Pandits in 1990s from Kashmir Valley. And whatever happened was it was happening for the 10.
So, Mr. Samir, here I want to touch upon the previous point you made here, which was about how do you control such a large population from putting out information. Here, it also demands the question, how much of this propaganda is state-sponsored? How much of it is to do with the internal politics? Because one of the fake images that firstly emerged after the Pulwama attack was of Rahul Gandhi, who was seen to be standing, a doctored photo, seen to be standing with the suicide bomber. So here, do you think it's just individuals who are putting out this information, or do you think there's something else happening in the background?
Most of it's actually by individuals. For example, the picture which you actually talked about of Congress President Rahul Gandhi standing with Adil was you could actually make out just by looking at the picture that it was fake. There were journalists, who were harassed because they tried to report Pulwama attack. In most of the cases, people actually are individuals. That they're those who actually are on the very right side of the divide or on the left side of the divide. Mm-hmm. You would never see people who are centrist, talking about this kind of propaganda, as Dr. Farasat was earlier saying, that, you actually have these kinds of three types of propagandas, wherein you actually can also try to create a positive image. But recently, in last 4 or 5 years, particularly since Mr. Modi came into office, because when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was running an election campaign, they had used hundreds and thousands of people, who actually were mobilized for trying to, talk about a particular ideology and what wrong has happened to India from the last 60 years. And if he came to office, it was primarily because there was this huge mobilization on the internet. There was a large contribution from these people who were active on social media, particularly on Facebook, disseminating information which was not true at all. But at the end of the day, it helped him a lot. Yeah. And that's what exactly has happened from the last few days, for example, after this Pulwama attack. There's information which is ridiculous. There is information which has never happened. There is information and pictures, mock pictures, images of journalists, images of people, who don't like your ideology being put out on internet and Facebook, which people might not have liked, but this is the time that actually they are using it against these particular
Mr. Samir, with everything that you're saying here, let me pose a question to you. Do you think things would have been different if there was another party, a more centrist party in power? Or do you think all this fake news, the spewing of hate on social media has a lot to do with the fact that the BJP government is in power?
I really don't think so. This is the time of elections, and it doesn't matter whether it was Congress or BJP. It really does not matter. At the end of the day, people are actually looking after their political constituencies and political issues to be addressed. The thing is that maybe in Congress, rule, it might have been a little bit less, but in BJP, it's much more good. People actually get emboldened when the government does not talk about, you violating a certain problem. For example, you saying on Twitter that you should, a person who actually holds a constitutional office saying on Twitter that they should be banned. When that kind of thing happens, you actually have a situation in which, when there's no government check, people get emboldened. And if you cannot do anything about a governor, what would you do about a common person? So it has nothing to do with a particular political party. It is actually about elections. It's also about, how much hate you can generate against a particular community and against Pakistan, of course, and how you can mobilize that hate to win votes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Dr. Ihab Awais a question here. When we're talking about how social media needs to take control, when Twitter tried to delete 1 million accounts in July 2018, its stocks plunged of $5 billion. So when we're talking about social media and the onus that lies with it to take control of the situation, how much do we have to factor in that these are business models that are operating on the basis of profit and their main concern isn't to tackle fake news?
One said that the social media have the big effect about spreading the fake news and the propaganda. And the other side said the social media don't have this power about this one. But I need to give you a good example about this situation. When we are looking about the Arab Spring Revolution, we can show that these social media already succeed in spreading and creating a political movement by creating virtual mobilization. And this propaganda already succeeds to enter the society in creating public opinion and for formation the political trends. So, and they already use it to distribute many values such as freedom, democracy, justice, and such idea. And this idea already promoted to a political movement. And from here, we can say that the social media, the dangerous point of the social media, when there is no control and no awareness among the internal society about what already is published in the social media.
So, Dr. Ihab, I do want to talk about what internal roles the governments need to play to take a control over the situation. But before that, we have to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. While we discuss what is happening on social media in India following the Pulwama attack, joining us now is Dr. Shaista Tabassum, who is an IR expert. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Shaista, when we're talking about propaganda and how social media is being actively used in order to spread a certain hate, sentiments of hate, can you tell us what impact that has on the relations between India and Pakistan when this is being done from the Indian side actively?
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. Well, I think that the social media is being used, rather abused more in societies which are I won't be saying it that it's overpopulated, but it is that the sentiments of the people are now used by the social media activists who are mostly the government supported or government funded. I think that as far as the Indian society is concerned, I won't say that it's a very developed and a civilized society, because the Indian society is a very emotional society, just like other societies of South Asia. The emotions of the people are exploited. They are created by propaganda, by different techniques. So this is, in fact, it's very unfortunate for the people of India that they have been convinced through propaganda, wrong information, fictitious ideas, and the war rhetoric, and there would be a very, very serious repercussions of such type of false information and the rather misinformation to the people. And I think that's going to be a very unfortunate, not only for India but for the region as a whole, for the people who are living across the borders in Pakistan and elsewhere. And that is it's actually the social media activists are actually playing with the sentiments of the people, giving wrong information. And it may develop into a very serious and irreversible situation.
So when we're talking about propaganda here, Dr. Farasat Rasool, and you mentioned earlier that opinion leaders play a very grave role in this. There was a report, post-investigation, which stated that 36 Bollywood celebrities were ready to spread certain messages, to spread certain propaganda messages in order to receive a payment for it. So what impact do you think that has on the larger society when Bollywood stars, opinion leaders, are being bribed in order to spread certain messages?
Actually, if we do a rough content analysis of all the social media chatter that is going on both sides, especially leading to this particular incident that we are talking about, you will see a clear picture, if not quite vague, a clear picture that from that part of the border, you will see a term which I rather use quite often, is a war journalism. You'll see a war journalism kind of situation over there. And when I see over here, it's more or less like peace journalism. So actually, it's the entire scenario that is being created, and then the celebrities and the other opinion leaders are just a part of it.
Yeah.
They are pushed into that particular stream of messages, and they are ready to do it in the name of patriotism, in the name of good spirit for their own country, to support their soldiers, to support their troops. the emotional baggage is there. That's how they get coaxed into using such kind of messages or propagating such.
And you mentioned a very interesting point here regarding to war journalism, and we're also joined by Dr. Zulfiqar Gilani, who's a psychologist. And in relation to that, Dr. Zulfiqar Gilani, I want to ask you, what impact does psychological warfare in this regard have on the society at large when we're talking about how social media is used?
Media is being used for sort of whipping up emotions. It functions like almost any other kind of propaganda. I mean, psychologically, what the person who's trying to propagate a certain opinion or a certain view, what they do is that they usually use sort of misleading information, but usually the information is couched in such a language that the person who's exposed to it isn't aware that in subtle ways what is happening is there's a sort of
And Dr. Zulfiqar Gilani, while we're talking about this, do you feel like in recent years social media has caused for greater polarization of opinion?
Well, yeah, in fact, since mass media came into the picture, whether one talks about television or social media or anything like that, one of the things which happens is that people people are very easily pushed into one position or the other. And the whole issue of openness to diversity of opinion and stuff like that is not there. Now, those are clever techniques in a sense which advertisers, I mean, the whole business started from advertising. The use of the media to manipulate the behavior of people. And that's where the psychologists came in, and they have done a fairly decent job in terms of using the social media to sort of manufacture consensus or manufacture a certain drift.
Yeah.
And now, what is happening? I mean, we have great examples of that, which happened in Pakistan, but currently, what is happening? It seems what is happening in India, although I don't listen to much of media there, is that there is a cherry picking of information. So all the information is not provided, and then it's provided in a certain, the oral as well as the visual presentation is such that it connects with the feelings of the person.
Yeah.
So when people already are divided, for example, on an issue or in terms of politics or anything like that.
Dr. Zulfiqar Gilani, thank you for that comment. Thank you for joining us and talking to us about that. Dr. Farasat Rasool, Dr. Gilani mentioned something interesting here, visual and verbal communication, how it is different. Tell us exactly how in propaganda both are used differently and what impact they have.
Actually, what propaganda does, that it modifies a certain piece of information in a particular way. So that we could have the same amount of response or same kind of response that we intend to have from our audience. And Dr. Gilani rightfully said that when a common man is exposed to a certain message on social media, he or she has absolutely no clue that how this message is being tailored or how this visual communication, how technology has helped in creating this particular message. He has no idea, just like in advertising, just like in other forms of communication. So that creates a problem. But again, I would put the responsibility on the mainstream media, because this is the mainstream media which can actually silence that propaganda which is going on the social media. Because when people receive messages from their close groups on WhatsApp or on Facebook, and in the night when they switch on their TV and they see their and they see your program, who would they believe more onto? the thing which is going on the mainstream media, on a TV channel, or in their
what's happening on social media.
Social media.
And with that, Mr. Samir, Yasir, when we're talking about the belligerent attitude of mainstream media following this attack, can you tell us what the attitude of the government has been, the Indian government has been, in order to tackle this, in order to somehow dispel the environment, to calm down the sentiments, if there has been any action taken at all?
There has been nothing at all, because in India there is this thought that if you try to actually do something with the media, it's going to become a big issue. But recently, what has happened, in the last 4 or 5 years, the ruling party has had 2 or 3 television channels who are like actually talking about what ruling party wants them to do, talk. And the majoritarian politics, but the thing is that, it's a huge market. India is a huge market, and there's so many news channels. It's not just 1 or 2, there are hundreds of them. There are good and the bad ones. It's not that everybody is same. But the thing is that the ones who have been instigating and the ones who have been preaching hate are actually being watched by majority. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That is the problem.
And Mr.
And
continue,
yeah.
Please.
And the problem is that they have been trying to peddle like lies about Kashmiris. For example, I would talk about us. Whenever there are Kashmiris on TV, they're always thought of these people who are like violent, who throw stones, and that is the reason the response of the Indian people has been like what it was recently, like people coming telling their tenants to just leave this place, or we will get somebody to throw you out.
And Mr. Samir, here, can you elaborate on how the Indian media is otherizing Kashmiris, showing that they are not their own people, in order to justify their imperial rule of sorts on them?
Well, I'll just tell you something very interesting, which was told to me by the parent of one of the child, who actually came back from Dehradun, who was harassed and beaten, in fact, by almost 12, 13 people. He said that, and he was talking about his child. He said that he never liked Kashmir. He liked Dehradun and the rest of India like any kid would do. For example, those people who were, the Kashmiri children today who are 16 and 17, they were brought under the shadow of the gun, in conflict. This has been going on for the last 29 years. And he said that after he came back to home, since that day, he's actually saying that, I hate India and I hate Indians. The difference today is that earlier, majority of the Kashmiris would say that we hate Indian state. But unfortunately, after this incident, after thousands of Kashmiri, boys were forced to come back to home, these kids are today saying that we also hate Indians now. And this is a problem. And this is where the Indian media, to a very large extent, is responsible. This is where the social media, particularly the Twitter and the Facebook, is responsible, because that outlandishness of those lies against Kashmiris have created a sense and a kind of perception about Kashmiri people that they're very violent.
Okay, so with that, I want to ask Dr. Shaista here, seeing such a belligerent form of media in India, what is the international image that is being created of India here?
Well, I think the negative role of the Indian media has been calculated. It has been rejected by the international community. What is the major role of any media is actually objectivity, which the Indian media has so far lost. They are based on opinion and speculations. So it's a more opinion-based media, trying to instead of convincing the people of the socio-economic issues, they are highlighting issues like corruption, sex, and etc. And these are actually the yellow journalism, defined as yellow journalism, and that is given the picture. The international media, which is reporting Indian media's report, they are more aware of that. What kind of a journalism Indian media is playing, and they are hiding the realities of the ground realities, what is going on in Kashmir, and what the policies of the Indian government. So I think that instead of portraying that what the Indian democracy is, they are actually giving the impression that there is something wrong, something fishy is going on. And
Dr. Shaista, to build on your point there, when the first ever United Nations report on human rights in Kashmir came out, India flatly rejected it. Do you think that rejection of a very objective report showed that the narrative India is trying to build is falling apart?
Well, this is right that India has rejected. India has never allowed the international human rights agencies and organizations to come and visit the valley. It means that there was something which required to be hidden at the governmental level. But the problem is that the violations are constantly increasing. The intensity of the human rights violation in Kashmir is constantly on rise, and there is a need that the community of the state at the international organizational level must check that what is going on in India. Why the government, the Indian government or the present Modi government is giving such a blank space. Yeah. I think this is a big question that is required to be answered, not by the Indians themselves, by the civil society of India, and by the community of the state as well. Yeah. So I think that but one thing which is very clear after the Pulwama incident is that the Indian journalism has now completely, it has been exposed to the people, to the world, and to the serious-minded people of the world and India itself. We are objecting on the reporting and the pattern of the reporting in the media.
And Dr. Shaista Tabassum, that is a very strong point you made there. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Samir Yasir, my last question to you. So now that we are seeing the elections coming, how can the civil society, how can the global international society anticipate more and more fake news coming out of India?
I think it's going to become worse in coming days because as far as I know, there is no stop to it. For example, whenever there are elections, just since this explosion of media, particularly after 4G came, 3G and 4G came to India, there has been always this, whenever there was an election, there's a particular period of time when, on social media, particularly the videos, get viral. And these are fake videos. There are websites who are doing terrific job, like Boom Fact Check. There's so many of them. Who are actually trying to burst these myths. But the problem is that when you make a particular video or a particular thought or particular comment, viral, and it actually has a huge impact on the people. The moment you try to set it right, you try to say, guys, A is not right, B is. The B does not get that much of retweets and Facebook likes as compared to the A. So the problem is that it doesn't end over there, and it's going to become worse because BJP in India is known for mobilizing people on the internet. It's not a secret. It's out there. Yeah. They have these are called IT cells, where, for example, if a journalist or if a common man tries to say anything against the party or against the prime minister, against the we have at least this freedom of speech here still. If somebody tries to say anything bad against them or tries to criticize against them, there's a huge army which is going to arrive on your feed, and they would be nasty on you. I mean, it has been.
And Mr. Samir, I take your point here, and this is a point that has been highlighted time and time again, that there is a trolling army that the BJP has. Dr. Farasat Rasool here, I'll put my last question to you. When Mr. Samir Yasir has continuously talked about how the accessibility of social media to such a large audience is the reason behind all of these problems. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do agree with that. And in fact, I pity on the fact that actually the social media was the extension, ideally speaking, social media was the extension of democracy. It was supposed to be the digitization of democracy. Yeah. A platform where people could sit together and people could talk about things which are of common interest, and the democracy could progress. along with the society. Now, the problem is that this has been hijacked by the warmongers, by the people who are media literate, who have expertise in media, who have expertise in creating message in a particular way, and they have hijacked this personal space, this space of the common people, where they could talk about freely, where they could freely talk about issues of their common interest. Now, it's been hijacked by all this political communication, which is warmongering at the very end.
A society has hijacked social media, and they have the expertise to churn out information in the way that will force a narrative.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Farasat Rasool, for joining us. Thank you so much, Mr. Samir Yasir, for joining us. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We'll see you again tomorrow. Goodbye.